We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Tesam and Beis Masechah Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 59b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara said that if something was said both to the Bnei Noach and then repeated at Har Sinai, so then it's a mitzvah for both of the Bnei Noach and it's a mitzvah for Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says, is that really true? V'harei Mila, but what about Bris Mila? Shenemro livnei Noach, that was said to Bnei Noach, T'chsiv, as it's written in the Pasuk V'yatas, Brisi Sishmor, you have to watch my bris, my covenant, V'nishnes b'Sinai, and it's repeated by Har Sinai. It says, Uvayom Hashmini Yimol, it says on the 8th day, there should be a Bris Mila, but yet, Li Yisrael Nemra, V'lo livnei Noach, we find Bris Mila something that's said to Klal Yisrael, but it's not a mitzvah for Bnei Noach, it's not a mitzvah for non-Jews. And the Gemara says, Ahu, in that situation, when it's repeated by the Jewish people, there's a specific reason that it is repeated. L'mishrei Shabbos hu da'asa. It's trying to permit that you're allowed to have Bris Milah on Shabbos. So if there's a particular detail as a reason why it's repeated for Klal Yisrael, so then actually we would say that the mitzvah is only for Klal Yisrael and not for the Bnei Noach, because by Yom va'afilu b'Shabbos, because again it means it's on the 8th day, and that's even if it falls out on Shabbos. And the Gemara continues, Vari Periya Varibya, but what about being fruitful and multiplying? Shenemro Livnei Noach, that was said to Bnei Noach, T'chsiv, as it's written in the Pasuk, V'yatem Peru Revu, it says the mitzvah of Peru Revu to Bnei Noach, V'nishnes b'Sinai, it was given to non-Jews, but then V'nishnes b'Sinai was repeated to the Jewish people. Like it says in the Pasuk, Lech emor lahem, go and say to them, Shuvu lachem li'olechem, you should return to your tents. And yet, Yisrael Nemra, yet that mitzvah is given over to Klal Yisrael, V'lo Livnei Noach, and it's not given over to Bnei Noach. And the Gemara says to that, Tahu, over there, the reason why it's repeated, L'chol davar shebeminyan sarach minyan acher la'atira hu da'asa. That's coming for a different idea. It's coming to teach that if you have a davar shebeminyan, let's say you have something which was voted upon from the Chachamim, you need to have another vote, another minyan, in order to permit such a prohibition. And Rashi explains, L'chol davar shebeminyan lo nishnas b'Sinai, the reason why this was repeated at Har Sinai, elam imnei she'asr lem tashmish shlosha yomim kodem matan Torah, because this was right before Matan Torah, and relations were forbidden 3 days before Matan Torah. And then after 3 days they had to make it mutter. And so therefore that was the reason of tzarech minyan acher la'atiro. Now even though automatically we should understand that after 3 days it's permitted, because the prohibition was only 3 days, when those 3 days have passed, but the Pasuk is teaching us the following idea. Anytime you have a vote of a court that says that something is asr, even if there's an amount of time that's given that it expires, you have to take another count again, you have to vote again, in order to officially permit it, when the time passes. But the Gemara continues, if so, if you're going to say with these cases that the reason why it's repeated to the Jewish people is for some particular detail, so kol chada v'chada nami nema mishum milsa isni. You should say that every single time by all of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. We can say that that is the reason that it's actually repeated. Rashi says, if so, kol sheva mitzvahs shechazru v'nishnu b'Sinai, all these Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach, which are again taught at Har Sinai, nema nami, we should say exactly the same thing. Kol achas v'achas hutzrucho lishnos al dover, everything it needs to teach something. For example, we can say avodas kochavim. You can say by avodas zara lefarish misa. That's in order to explain the death penalty, to explain exactly what it is. Va'avodos hasurn b'an, the particulars of how the person is serving the avodas zara. V'chein gilui arayos lefarish onshin, by gilui arayos we're explaining what the punishment is. V'neim b'dekulu lo nishnu, and so then we're going to say really nothing has really been repeated because it's always for some detail. Uli Yisrael nesru v'lo livnei Noach, and then we should say that all Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach were really only given to Klal Yisrael, and they were not given to the Bnei Noach. And the Gemara continues and answers, Hachi Kamar, this is what we mean to say, Azhara Mahadiru Misna Ba Lamali, what's the purpose of going again and giving a warning? And Rashi explains, Azhara Mahadiru Misna Ba Lamali, Lamahadiru Michtav Azhara Ditu, why do you have to repeat the warning? Elashmami no Lazir Levnei Noach Uli Yisrael Asif. We're going ahead and repeating the warning, that's to say that the warning is given both to the Bnei Noach and to Klal Yisrael. That's what is true by the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. And the Gemara continues, we said in the previous Amud, Ve'ein Lanu, Alagid HaNasha Bilvad, V'alivad Rabbi Yehuda, the only example of something that was just said to the Bnei Noach and was not repeated at Har Sinai, and we assume, therefore, that it's actually only given to Klal Yisrael, the only example is Gid HaNasha, according to Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara says, Hani Nami, but these ones also, Lo Isni, they were not repeated at Har Sinai, and Rashi explains, Hani Nami, Mila Upirya Verivya, going back now to Bris Mila and Pru Revu, Halo Isnu, those were not things that were repeated at Har Sinai. To Ha'amrit Lemil Sehud because we just said above that any repetition that was there was for a particular detail, and so therefore we do have other examples besides Gid Hanosha of something which is said to the Bnei Noach and then not really repeated, or not technically repeated. And the Gemara says, no, Hani Isni L'Shum Milsa Bialma, Halu Isni Klal. Over there at least they were repeated for something, but this we're talking about something that was not repeated at all. And Rashi explains, Hada Gid Hanosha Lo Isnu Klal. When it comes to Gid Hanosha, it was not repeated at all. Umishamachi Lo Chashav Lubade, that's why it's not counted. It's not together with Mila and Pru-Ravu. Umiyu Hanachnami Minhu Amurus Livnei Noach Velo Nishnu B'Sinai Heim, but nevertheless, those also would be counted as things that were said to the Bnei Noach and not repeated at Har Sinai, which would mean Uli Yisrael Nemru, that it's really a mitzvah given to Klal Yisrael, Velo Livnei Noach Misinai Ulahalon, and not to the Bnei Noach from Sinai, as we will explain. And the Gemara continues, if you want, I could say another answer. When it comes to Mila, when it comes to Bris Mila, Meikar li Avram, Hu Dukam Mazer le Rachmana. Actually, the warning was actually given originally to Avraham. It says, V'ato es brisi sishmor atov ezaracha acharecha l'dorosam. And what does it say? It says, you and the generations that follow you. And so therefore we understand that atov ezaracha in, we could say by Bris Mila, that the command actually was only given to Klal Yisrael. You and your children, yes. In Ishachrina lo, it's not given to anyone else. And Rashi explains, when it comes to Bris Mila, it was given from Sinai, and actually, when it was given at Sinai, it wasn't just for details, it was for the main mitzvah. And now you ask, so we said before, Rabbi Yossi said that if it was given to the Bnei Noach and repeated at Sinai, then it actually should be a mitzvah for the Bnei Noach and for Klal Yisrael. The reason why Mila is not included as one of the Sheva mitzvahs Bnei Noach, Misham de Mila, Lav Livnei Noach, Nemra Afila Mikodem Sinai. Even before I Sinai, Mila was not given to the Bnei Noach. Ela Lezera Avram Lechud. It was only given to the descendants, the children of Avram. V'hashtanami Zera Avram. And now also it means to say the Zera Avram, the Hainu Yisrael. Who is the Zera Avram? That's Klal Yisrael. The Hainu Yisrael who didn't higiba, that's Klal Yisrael. They're the ones who keep the mitzvah of Bris Mila. But the Gemara says if that's the case, that we understand that Tov Zaracha in and Inish Achrina lo, that the original mitzvah of Bris Mila was given to you and your children and nobody else. But Elameata, but according to that, Bnei Yishmael l'chayvu. So the Bnei Yishmael, they're children of Avram. They also should be chayiv in Bris Mila. And the Gemara says to that, no, ki bi Yitzchak yikari l'chazar. The pasuk says that Yitzchak is called your zera. Only Yitzchak is called the child of Avram for this purpose, and not the Bnei Yishmael. But the Gemara says Bnei Esav l'chayvu. Okay, but the children of Esav also, they're descendants of Avram. And the Gemara says no, bi Yitzchak. It's the Yitzchak. It means bi Yitzchak. Someone that comes out of Yitzchak, meaning Yaakov, v'lo kol Yitzchak, but not everyone that comes out of Yitzchak, and therefore Esav is not included. But the Gemara continues, Maskif la Rav Oshi. Rav Oshi asks a question on this. Elamayata, but according to that, if we're saying that the command was given to Avram and then only to Yitzchak, only to Yaakov, only to those descendants of Yaakov and nobody else, so then Bnei Keturah lo l'chayvu, so then the children of Keturah, they should not have been chayiv in Bris Mila. And Rashi explains the question, Bnei Keturah osan shisha, meaning those 6 sons of Keturah, shenodu li Avram, that were born to Avram, hein atzman lo l'chayvu, they themselves should not have been obligated, because they're not descendants, they're not Yitzchak, and they're not Yaakov or Yaakov's descendants. And then we would have to say that Avram did not give Bris Mila to all of his sons during his lifetime, which is not the case. And the Gemara says to that, Ha'amar Rabbi Yossi bar Avin. Rabbi Yossi bar Avin says, V'yitem Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Some say Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says, as brisi heifar, when the pasuk says the phrase as brisi heifar, l'ravos b'nei keturah, that comes to include the b'nei keturah, meaning those particular sons. Rashi explains, L'rabos b'nei keturah, to include the b'nei keturah, osam shisham levadim, those 6 alone, v'lo zarim, but not their descendants. Aval Avram nitztav l'chol hanoladim lo, but Avram was commanded for all that were born to him, and so the b'nei keturah, they alone were given bris milah, but not their descendants. And again, that's how we can explain why it is that the mitzvah of bris milah is only to Klal Yisrael and not to the b'nei Noach. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Adam Harishon, lo huter lo basar la'achila. When it came to Adam Harishon, he was not allowed to eat meat. T'chsiv, as it's written, lachem yeh lo'achla, o l'chal chayas ha'aretz, v'lo chayas ha'aretz lachem. It says that you're going to eat, it's talking over here of the vegetation, and that belongs to the chayas ha'aretz as well. But you, the chayas ha'aretz, do not belong to you. You're not allowed to eat the animals. Ukeshabo b'nei Noach, and when the children of Noach came along, hitter lahem, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu permitted for them to eat meat. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Yerik Esav Nasati Lachem Eskol. I'm giving you everything, just like the vegetation. You can eat meat as well. Yachol lo yehei Aver min hachai noheg. I might think that Aver min hachai does not apply when it comes to the Bnei Noach. Tamilomar ach basar benafsho damo lo sochelu. It says basar benafsho again. When the soul is still in the animal, then you're not allowed to have the limbs. You're not allowed to have Aver min hachai. Yachol af l'shratzim. Now I might think that Aver min hachai applies even to the creeping creatures. Talmud lomar ach. The pasuk says the word ach, and the Gemara says, "Umay Talmud, what exactly is this limud?" Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna explains, "Damo" means to say like this: it's blood. Misha damo cholak mi basar. This halacha of Aver min hachai applies if its blood is distinct from its flesh. Yatsu shratzim, that excludes the creeping creatures. She'ein damam cholak mi basar. Their blood is not distinct from their flesh. But the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question on this from the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, Redu b'degas hayam. It says that Adam HaRishon, he can rule over the fish of the sea. My lav lachil doesn't mean that he's allowed to eat the fish. The Gemara says, Lo, no, limalacha means he can use the fish for malacha, for work. The Gemara says, V'dagim b'nei malacha ninu, can you use fish for work? What kind of work are we talking about? And the Gemara says, yes, we can say that there's some kind of work with fish. K'de Rachva, it's just like Rachva's question. The boy Rachva, because Rachva asked the following question, Hinig bi'iza v'shibut. What if a person would lead, he would have the goat and the fish, it would pull along, let's say, his plow, would that be considered a transgression of kilayim? So you see there's a possibility of using fish for work. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming to the following proof of Of HaShamayim. It says also Adam can rule over the birds. My lav lachila, doesn't mean that he's allowed to eat the birds. And the Gemara says, Lo, no, l'malach, again it means for malach, it means for work. Again the Gemara asks, Va'ofos b'nei malach and inu, is it possible to do work with birds? And the Gemara says, yes, could the boy Rabba bar Rav Huna? It's like the question that Rabba bar Rav Huna had. Dosh ba'avozim v'tarnagolim. Let's say a person threshes with geese and with chickens. Rav Yossi, Rav Yehuda, that according to Rav Yossi, Rav Yehuda, what would be the halacha? So you see there is a kind of work that can be done with birds. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, the following proof of Echol Chaya Haromes Ala Aretz, that Adam, that man rules over the wild animals. So again, does that mean to say that he can eat them? And the Gemara says, no, ahula suye nachash hudasa, that's coming for the snake, because again, there can be work that can be done with the snake. The Tanya is willing to the Bryce, Rav Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Rav Shimon ben Menashe says, Chaval al shamish gadol shavin min ha'olam, woe is to the fact that we lost out on a great servant that was lost from the world. Shel mole lo neskal nachash, because had the nachash, the snake, not been cursed, kol echad v'echad miYisrael, each one of Klal Yisrael, each member of Klal Yisrael, hayu mizdavnin lo shnei Chashim Tovim, he'd have for himself two good snakes. Echad Mishagr L'Tzafon, he'd send one to the north. Ve'echad Mishagr L'Darim, he'd send the other one to the south. L'Havi Lo Sandalvonim Tovim, to bring good stones. Ve'avonim Tovos, to bring different kinds of stones. Umargalios, and pearls. V'loda, not only that, Alashim Avshilin Ritzua Tachas Navo, they could put a strap under the snake's tail. Umotzi Ba'afar L'Ginaso U'Lechorvaso, he'd be able to drag that along the earth and bring up the earth for the sake of his garden and for the sake of his rune. And Rashi explains, Hinig be'izav shibuta, if he's leading with a goat and a fish, means kasher karon ledog shabayam, v'ula'ez b'yabasha. Let's say he ties his wagon to a fish in the sea and to a goat that's on the dry land, al sfas hayam, that's along the shore, u'shneim manhigin bo, and he's using both of these animals in order to lead, in order to pull the wagon. So what would be the halacha? Loka mishamanik b'kilayim olo? Would that be a problem of kilayim or not? Choresh b'shoro v'chamor lavdafka, Rashi points out, it doesn't have to be that you're plowing with an ox and a donkey. As long as you use two species, that's going to be a problem. And so in any case, you see there is a kind of work that can be done with a fish. And Rashi continues, Dosh be'avozim v'tarnagolim Rav Yossi Rav Yehuda ma'u. Let's say he threshes with geese and chickens according to Rav Yossi Rav Yehuda. What's the halacha? Ba'asocher esapolim tanan hayosu b'yodav avalo b'ragla avalo b'yodav hareza yochel. It says over there in the Mishnah in Bab Metzia, if he's working with his hands and not his feet, or his feet and not his hands, so he has permission to eat from that field. Like it says, when you come in the vineyard of your friend, it's talking about a worker in the field. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, the work has to be with hands and feet. So Rabba's question was, with regards to animals, this is really a prohibition. You can't muzzle the animal that's working in the field. It has to be allowed to eat. So he asked, let's say you're threshing with geese or chicken. All they have is feet. So Over there, what would be the halacha? Would there be a transgression against muzzling? Olo or not, because because it needs to be hands and feet like a shore, and that you don't have over here, and so therefore there's no prohibition in terms of muzzling. Odilmor, maybe kol kocho kashor binan, as long as the animal is using all of its strength like a shore, v'ha'ika, so that you have over here, and there would be that prohibition in terms of muzzling, but the point is, alma b'nei malachin, and you see that birds, you can do work with the birds. And Rashi further explains Sandal Levonin, as we translated when we did the Gemara, Shem Even Tov. This is the name of a particular good stone. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following Bryce. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, Omer Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema would say, Adam Arishon, Meisvei beGan Eden Haya, Adam Arishon was reclining in Gan Eden, V'hayu Malachi Asharis Solin Lo Basar, and the angels were roasting meat for him, Umesanan Lo Yayin, and they were straining wine for him. Heitzitz Bo Nachash, the snake saw this, V'ra Bechvodo, he saw the honor that he was getting, V'niskani Bo, and that's how he became jealous. In any case, we see that Adam Arishon was eating meat. And the Gemara answers, Hasam over there, but Basar Hayorid min Hashamayim, that was meat that came down from the heavens. That is an exception. The Gemara says, Mika Basar Hayorid min Hashamayim, is there such a thing as meat that comes down from the heavens? And the Gemara says, yes, there is. Ki Had Rav Shimon ben Chalafta. It's like the story with Rav Shimon ben Chalafta, Havikazel Borchi, he was going on the road. Pagu bo Hanach Ar Yasa, he met with some lions, the Havakonami La'ape, they were roaring at him. Amar, so he said the pasuk of Hakfirim Shoagim Latarif, he said that the young lions, they need food also. Nechisu Leitarti Atmasa, so two thighs, they came down from heaven. Chada Achlua, one of them was eaten, meaning one of them he gave to the lions, V'chada Shavkua, and one he left, he kept for himself. And Aisain, he brought it, Vasal Lebei Midrash, he brought this meat that came down from the heavens, he brought it to the Beis Medrash. Boy Allah, and he asked about it, Davar Tameh, who says, this is something that is Tameh, is it not kosher, or Davar Tar, is it something Tar, is it kosher? Amrulei, so they said to him, in Davar Tameh Yored Min Hashamayim, something that's Tameh would not come down from the heavens, and therefore we can assume that it is kosher. Boy Minei Rabbi Zera me Rabbi Avo, Rabbi Zera asked Rabbi Avo, Yardalo Demus Chamor Ma, well, what if it would have been a donkey that came down from the heavens? Would that have been kosher? Amarlei said to him, Yored Nalo, he said to him, foolish bird, Ha'amri Lei, they said to him, Ein Davar Tameh Yored Min Hashamayim, that something Tameh would never come down from the heavens, and therefore if that happened, it would indeed be kosher. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Brisa said, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Afal Akishaf, also when it comes to sorcery, the Bnei Noach are commanded. And the Gemara says, my time with Rabbi Shimon, what's the reason of Rabbi Shimon Dechsib? Because it's written in the Pasuk, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samich Amar Aleph.